Velia walked down the metal hallway of the space station. Her head low, her shoulders heavy, and her steps slow. Every time she passed by other workers, she could hear the same cruel sounds, laughter. Whispers followed behind her like shadows. "She's so big. How does the floor not break?" "I think the ship shakes every time she walks. Too big to matter," one said. And the others laughed harder. Velia didn't answer. She never did. She just held her small lunch bag close and kept walking, pretending she couldn't hear anything. But the truth was she heard it all. Every word, every laugh, every insult. She was taller and wider than most of her kind. Her purple skin glowed faintly under the hallway lights. Her long black hair always tied back neatly. She wore the same worker suit as everyone else. But on her, always looked stretched. And so, people looked at her, not with respect or kindness, but with mocking eyes. She worked in the maintenance bay alone. No one wanted her on their team. They said she was too slow, too heavy, too clumsy. What they didn't know was this. When Velia was alone, she drew beautiful things. In her private sketchbook, she designed energy cores, reactor shields, and systems no one had ever seen before. But no one ever asked her about them, because to them, her body was all they saw. One day, she sat in the back of the dining hall, quietly eating a small meal. Her tray was half empty. She didn't eat much. People would laugh louder when she did. That's when he walked in. Ray, a human mechanic, new to the station. He looked tired, his hands greasy, but his eyes were sharp. Ray grabbed his food and looked around the busy hall. He saw empty chairs everywhere, but his eyes stopped on Velia. She sat alone at the far corner. Something in her expression made him pause. Ray walked over. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, smiling politely. Velia blinked, confused. No one had ever asked her that. She nodded silently. Surprised, they sat together in silence for a few minutes. Ray didn't say anything rude. Didn't laugh, didn't stare at her. He just ate his food and minded his business. But when he got up to leave, something fell from Velia's bag, a notebook. Ray picked it up and flipped it open before she could stop him. "What's this?" he asked gently. Velia froze. "No, give it back," she said, reaching out. Clearly embarrassed, Ray didn't laugh. Instead, he looked at one of the pages, a detailed diagram of a ship's power system. His eyes widened. "This ... is brilliant," he whispered. Velia stared at him, not sure if he was mocking her. "You're serious?" she asked softly. Ray nodded. "Yeah, I work with this stuff every day. And your design this could improve energy flow by 40%, maybe more." Velia looked away. "No one listens. They say I should clean floors, not think." Ray closed the notebook and handed it back to her. "They're wrong," he said firmly. "You're smart, and this is amazing." Velia's hands trembled as she took the book. It had been so long since anyone said something kind to her, even longer since someone said she was smart. Not big, not slow, but smart. Ray smiled again. "Thanks for letting me sit," he said, and then walked away. That night, Velia sat on her bunk, holding her notebook to her chest. Her heart felt strange, like it was beating for the first time in years. The next morning, something happened. When she reached the hallway door, Ray was already there. He saw her coming and smiled. Then he held the door open for her. Gasps came from the nearby workers. One whispered, "Why is he helping her?" Another said, "That human must be crazy." But Ray didn't care. He nodded at her. "Good morning, Velia." She blinked and whispered back, "Good morning." That one small act changed something. For the first time, she walked through that hallway without looking down, but deep inside her heart, a voice still whispered, "They still don't believe in you." And maybe that was true, but now someone did. And that was enough to begin the change. Velia sat in her maintenance room. It's a small space filled with tools, wires, and her quiet dreams. The laughter from the hallway still echoed in her mind. But now there was a new voice inside her too. Voice that said, "Ray believes in you." She looked at her sketchbook again, flipping through pages filled with ship designs, energy modules, and systems that no one else had seen. Some pages were old, marked with red ink from past rejections. Others were new, clean, sharp, and hopeful. Velia had built a world inside her mind, one where engines didn't waste power and starships ran smooth. But outside her room, she was still just the too big girl. No one had asked what she could do. No one. Except Ray. That same afternoon, Ray came knocking on her workshop door. Velia. He called gently. She opened the door halfway. Nervous, he smiled, holding up a small tablet. "I tried building one of your designs in the simulation room," he said. "It worked. Better than the current system." Velia's eyes widened. "You ... really tested it?" Ray nodded. "I'm serious. This could change how ships run." He stepped inside her workspace and looked around. "Impressed by the organized chaos, why haven't you submitted this to the engineering board?" Velia looked down, her voice quiet. "They don't take me seriously. They say I should sweep, not design." Ray frowned. "That's ridiculous. You're more talented than half the board." He paused, then added, "Let me help you submit this. We'll do it together." Velia hesitated. She had heard too many promises before, but something about Ray's eyes. They didn't lie. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay." The next day, Ray took her design file and went to the engineering head, a strict and proud alien named Gorvax. Gorvax was tall, with sharp horns and sharper words. When Ray showed him the file, Gorvax raised an eyebrow. "Who made this?" he asked. Ray replied calmly, "Velia, the maintenance tech." Gorvax's mouth twisted into a smirk. "The big girl. Oh, she plays with wires and thinks she's an engineer now." Ray stood firm. "This design improved simulation efficiency by 42%. "That's real." Gorvax waved a hand. "Fine. We'll test it during night cycle." That night, while most of the crew slept, the system was tested quietly. The results shocked everyone. Velia's design worked perfectly. The ship's power usage dropped, the engine ran cooler, and the system auto-corrected for faults. Ray rushed to Velia's quarters the next morning, excitement in his voice. "They used your design. It worked. They're talking about upgrading the entire ship." Velia stared at him in disbelief. "They didn't say anything to me," she whispered. Ray's smile faded. "They probably don't want to give you credit." Velia shook her head. "I don't want to make trouble." Ray stepped closer. "No, you don't deserve silence. You saved them fuel, time, and maybe lives in a crisis. That matters." Later that day, Velia walked into the control deck for the first time in years. She held her sketchbook tight, heart pounding. Eyes followed her. Whispers started again. Why is she here? Probably lost. She better not sit on anything important. Ray stood next to her, a calm strength in his presence. He raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, the engineer who fixed your energy core, Velia." The room went quiet. Velia's cheeks turned warm, but she didn't run. She opened her sketchbook and spoke, voice trembling but clear. "This is a new stabilizer design. It could help with long-distance flight. I've tested it in simulations." A few scoffed, but one junior tech raised his hand. "Can I see the model?" Velia handed it over, her fingers shaking. Ray watched, proud, as the young tech scanned the design and nodded slowly. This is good," he said. "Better than what we've been using for the first time." Others leaned forward, curious, not mocking. Velia stood a little taller, still unsure, but not invisible anymore, but in the shadows of the control deck. Someone wasn't smiling. Chief Engineer Gorvax. He narrowed his eyes at Ray and Vilea. If her designs keep working, he thought, I lose my position. He walked away without a word. Planning something dangerous, that night, Vilea couldn't sleep. Her heart was full, not of fear, but of hope, for the first time. She believed maybe she could do more than just fix wires. Maybe her mind mattered too. Maybe she wasn't just too big. Maybe she was meant to build stars. The station lights buzzed low above Velia's head as she sat cross-legged on the cold metal floor of her tiny maintenance room. Sparks flew from a loose wire as she carefully soldered a broken panel. Her hands moved like they had done it 1,000 times, and they had. But no one ever saw. No one ever looked outside her door. The others laughed in the break room, playing cards and making jokes. She could hear them clearly because they didn't even bother to whisper anymore. She doesn't need a team. She's big enough to count as 3 engineers anyway. The words stabbed, but she stayed quiet, just like always. The only sound she trusted was the soft hum of machines. That was her real language. The language of gears, wires, and circuits. Then came the knock, a soft, polite knock. She froze, not used to visitors. Slowly, she opened the door and saw Ray, the human who had sat with her in the cafeteria. He smiled gently and held out something. Wrapped in cloth, I brought you something, he said. Vilea blinked. She opened the bundle and saw a brand new set of sketching tools, a gift for her. Why? She asked softly, confused. Because your designs are incredible, Ray replied. I showed one to a junior tech friend. He said your math was better than his supervisor's. Vilea didn't know what to say. No one had ever looked at her designs without laughing. No one had ever seen her as more than her size. Can you show me more? Ray asked, eyes full of real curiosity. She nodded slowly and led him inside. The walls of her small room were covered in blueprints, each one hand-drawn, all full of careful measurements and brilliant ideas. From solar stabilizers to faster cooling systems, each could change how starships worked. Ray walked along the wall. Eyes wide, you made all of this. Vilea nodded. Quietly, he smiled. You're not a maintenance worker, he said. You're an engineer who's been ignored. Those words made her heart jump. She wanted to believe him, but she was scared. What if they laugh again? She whispered. Ray's smile faded. Then let them laugh, he said. But let them laugh after you fix everything they broke. Later that day, Ray submitted one of her designs to the tech department without using her name. He just labeled it anonymous proposal. 3 hours later, the entire energy system was replaced with her version. And it worked, better than anything they had used before. The head technician sent out a message. Whichever genius made this report to me immediately. Ray turned to Vilea with a big grin. That's you. But she shook her head, afraid they'll change their minds when they see me. She said, I'm not what they expect. Ray paused, then said something bold. Then let's tell them after they fall in love with your work. The next morning, the engineering department gathered for the presentation of the mystery design. Vilea watched from behind a wall, heart beating fast. Gorvex, the head engineer, stepped forward. This stabilizer corrected the output flow, and it works better than our last 6 upgrades, he admitted. Whoever you are, come forward. Ray slowly raised his hand. I submitted it, he said calmly. Gasps went around the room, but I didn't design it, he added. Turning around, he gestured toward the door where Vilea stood. Trembling, she did. Dead. Silence, eyes moved to her massive figure. And then came the voices. She can't be serious. She fixes pipes, not engines. She probably copied it. But then the junior tech stepped forward. I checked the design, he said. Loudly, it was perfect. And there's more where that came from, isn't there? He looked at Vilea, and she nodded, silently handing him her next blueprint. Suddenly, interest replaced laughter. Gorvik stared at the design. His jaw tight, his pride hurt. He turned away without another word, walking out. But Valia felt something in her chest. Not pain, not fear. It was something new hope. For the first time, they didn't just see her size, they saw her mind. Ray leaned closer and whispered, "You did that." But in the shadows of the tech hall, jealousy burned. Gorvex's hands clenched into fists. He wouldn't let a girl like her take his spotlight. He began planning his next move, and this time it would be dangerous. That night, Valia sat alone again in her room. But this time, she wasn't sad. She looked at her tools, her sketches, her wires, and whispered to herself, they called. Me too big to matter. She touched the design board and smiled. Let's show them how much I can change. Alarms were not supposed to sound at that hour. It was the quiet cycle when lights dimmed, crew rested, and systems ran smooth like clockwork. But on this day, at exactly 2:47 station time, red lights flashed, sirens screamed, and a mechanical voice rang through the hall. Warning, reactor overload. Core unstable. Velia jumped from her bunk, her heart pounding. She'd never heard that alarm before, not in all the years she'd worked below deck. Something was very wrong. She grabbed her toolkit without thinking, shoved her sketches into a folder, and ran toward the engine chamber. Others were already there, shouting, panicking, pressing buttons that didn't work. Steam hissed from broken pipes. The floor vibrated, and sparks fell from the ceiling. Ray was already on site. Face soaked with sweat, hands black with grease. Pressure's rising. The coolant loop is stuck. He yelled, "Where's Gorvax?" Someone cried, "He's locked himself in the command room," another whispered. Ray cursed under his breath. Of course he did. Suddenly Valia appeared in the doorway, panting, clutching her folder. The engineers froze. Some sneered, some looked surprised. What's she doing here? She's not part of this team, but Ray stepped back and shouted, "She's the only one who can help." Velia moved to the control panel, eyes scanning the blinking warnings, coolant failure, overload in 3 minutes. She didn't ask permission. She opened her folder, flipped to a specific blueprinted diagram she had drawn just 3 weeks ago. One no one had taken seriously until now. She took a deep breath, then pointed at the system screen. "We need to reroute the power through the backup ring," she said, "but the regulators can't handle that much flow." A technician argued, "They can if we switch the stabilizer frequency to manual mode," she replied, calm but fast. Ray nodded. "She's right. I saw her run it in simulation. No time to argue. Either trust her or watch this ship burn." Silence fell. Then, slowly, the young technician moved to assist her. Together, they began typing commands, flipping switches, and cutting off the broken coolant system. Velia's hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't crack for the first time. She wasn't just building something alone, she was leading. Pressure dropping. Someone shouted, "Core temperature stabilizing." "It's working." And then the alarm stopped, just like that. The screaming sirens died. The red lights faded, and the ship sighed in relief. No one spoke for a moment. No one breathed. Then a cheer rose from the workers. A raw, honest, loud cheer. One voice yelled, "She did it." Another said, "That big girl just saved the whole ship." Valia stood frozen, her fingers still on the console. She looked up at Ray, who smiled with pride in his eyes. But before she could say anything, a cold voice echoed from the hallway. It was Gorvax. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes full of fire. "What is going on here?" Ray stepped forward. Reactor was seconds from blowing. Velia saved it. Her design Gorvax cut him off. She isn't on the engineering team. She had no clearance. She touched critical systems. That's a crime. The room fell silent again. The cheer died. All eyes turned to Valia, who now felt small despite her size. "But she saved us," one worker said. Gorvax raised his voice. She's unauthorized. I want her reported to Central Command. Ray stepped in front of Velia. You want to punish her for saving lives? She did what you were too afraid to do. Before Gorvex could reply, a new voice crackled from the intercom. It was the ship's AI. Voice clear and robotic. Velia of Maintenance Deck identified as the source of critical reactor stabilization protocol. Credit recorded. Violation dismissed under Emergency Protocol 47B. Gorvex's face turned pale. He stepped back, defeated. The AI had spoken. The system had chosen her over him. Velia didn't speak. She just looked around at the people who once laughed at her. Now, they looked at her with wide eyes, with respect. With something new admiration, Ray whispered. They can't ignore you now. But somewhere in Velia's heart, she knew this wasn't the end of the battle. Because people like Gorvex didn't give up, and jealousy is a dangerous thing. Later that night, Velia stood by the observation window, looking out at the stars. Her reflection stared back at her big. Strong, and no longer hiding. She wasn't just the girl in the background anymore. She was the mind that saved a ship, and deep in the shadows of the command room. Gorvex was already planning his revenge, because in his eyes, Velia had embarrassed him, and he was not going to let it end here. The hallway to command court was cold, silent, and long. Velia walked through it slowly, each step echoing louder than her breath. Behind her, 2 guards followed, not with cruelty, but with quiet eyes ahead of her. Double metal doors waited. Like judgment itself, she wasn't being honored. She was being put on trial, even after saving the ship. She was summoned accused of interfering with core systems, of breaking security rules. She had risked her life to stop a reactor meltdown. But instead of medals, they gave her a summons notice. Ray stood outside the chamber doors, pacing, fists clenched. As soon as he saw her, he walked up. This is insane, he said. You saved all of them. They should be thanking you. Velia gave a sad smile. I'm still just a maintenance worker to them. The doors opened. A voice called out, Velia of Maintenance Deck enter. Inside, the command court was full. High-ranking officers, technicians, and even spectators sat in cold rows. In the center, 3 council members sat behind a curved desk, and at the far right, Gorvex stood proudly, arms folded, pretending to look calm, but his eyes burned with hate. One of the council judges, a gray-scaled woman named Madame Ilora, raised her hand. Velia, you are accused of interfering with ship control systems without proper clearance. Do you understand this charge? Velia nodded slowly. Yes. Madame Ilora continued. You also submitted unapproved designs, altered cooling protocols, and redirected energy paths during a Class 1 emergency. Ray stepped forward. She saved us. The system was minutes from failure. None of us knew what to do. She knew exactly what to do. Another judge frowned. She had no permission. She bypassed protocol. Gorvex stepped forward and said loudly, she endangered the ship. A mistake in her untested system could have destroyed all of us. Velia finally spoke, her voice steady but soft. I didn't come to be a hero, she said. I saw something broken. I fixed it. That's all I've ever done here. I offered my designs before. No one ever read them. Not because they were wrong, but because I was the one who made them. A quiet murmur ran through the room. Some people lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others looked uncertain. Ray pulled out a data chip and placed it on the evidence table. This chip holds the simulation files, he said. It shows her designs work. Her stabilizer is now part of our daily operations. A technician in the back stood up nervously. I used her backup energy loop in Section 7 just this morning. It works better than the standard model. For the first time, doubt entered the council's eyes. Madame Ilora looked to Gorvex. Why were these designs not reviewed earlier? Gorvex tightened his jaw. They came from maintenance. We receive Hundreds of false or silly submissions. She has no formal training. No degree, Velia answered quietly, because I was never allowed into your schools. They said I wouldn't fit through the desk. The court went completely silent. A low breath escaped Ray's mouth as he turned to the crowd. All she ever wanted was to be useful. She was. She is. And you punished her for being quiet. And you punished her for being quiet. Brilliant in the wrong body, one of the council members leaned in and whispered something to Ilora. She nodded, tapped a few buttons on her console, and then looked at Velia. Your actions during the emergency fall under protocol for 7B, which allows direct intervention when all registered engineers fail. Your actions, though unauthorized, are therefore protected by law. A gasp of relief came from Ray. Ilora continued. We do not find you guilty, but we also cannot ignore the culture of dismissal and bias that led to this moment. The command will review how worker suggestions are handled moving forward. Velia's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of release. She had spoken the truth, and for once they listened. But just as she turned to leave, Ilora spoke. Again, one last thing, Velia, we have reviewed your full portfolio. Your designs, your notes, your models. We are offering you a place as junior engineer. Effective immediately, the room was still. Even Gorvex blinked in disbelief. Velia's lips parted slightly. She looked at Ray, who grinned wider than she had ever seen. You earned it, he whispered. Velia stood tall, taller than ever before. Not because of her size, but because now the world was finally starting to see her strength. She walked out of that courtroom not as the big girl who fixed wires, but as the engineer nobody wanted until she became the one they needed most. But deep inside the shadows of his pride, Gorvax clenched his fists once again, because now he wasn't just angry, he was humiliated, and his next move would be far worse. Gorvax stood alone in the corner of the engineering bay, his claws digging into the side of a cold steel table. Around him, the crew buzzed with excitement. Talking about Velia, the girl no one had believed in, the one who had now been promoted as junior engineer. She saved the ship. She's a genius. I heard her new model might go into fleet-wide testing. Each word was like poison in Gorvax's ears. Each smile meant he was falling deeper into the background. He had been chief engineer for years, and now, because of her, he was being overlooked. He slammed his fist on the table. She stole my spotlight, he muttered. They'll see who she really is soon enough. But Gorvax didn't want to wait for a mistake. He wanted to create one. Meanwhile, Velia sat at her new station. Wide-eyed and overwhelmed, her uniform still looked a little tight. But now it carried a badge that read, Engineering Division Rank. Junior Engineer Ray came by with a warm smile and 2 mugs of synth tea. Still believe this is real, he joked, handing her one. Velia gave a small laugh. Not really, she admitted. Feels like I'm living someone else's life. Ray tapped her sketchbook that now sat proudly on her desk. No, this is exactly the life you built. She looked around the room. Some engineers still avoided eye contact. Some nodded respectfully, but the difference was clear. They saw her now. But what Velia didn't see was that someone had cloned her security login from her old maintenance account. Later that night, inside the ship's secure control room, a shadow moved silently. Gorvex had entered using a stolen maintenance override, code 1 only Velia had ever used. He walked up to the central stabilizer server, the same one built using Velia's design. He pulled a thin device from his coat and attached it to the core controls. He typed quickly, loading a corrupt data package. It'll take 24 hours to trigger. He whispered, just enough time for her to approve the final upgrade. And when the system crashes, she be blamed. He left without a trace. No alarms, no witnesses, no sound. The next morning, Ilya was called to the main deck. Commander says your stabilizer design is going fleet-wide. Ray said with a grin, you need to approve the final activation sequence. Velia's hands trembled as she tapped the control panel. A screen popped up. Activate fleet stabilizer upgrade. She looked around, unsure. Are we ready? A technician beside her nodded. All tests passed. It's the best system we've had in years. Velia smiled and pressed activate. A small beep echoed through the chamber, and the command was sent to every ship in the sector. She had done it. A once dismissed maintenance girl was now changing the galaxy. But 24 hours later, it all went wrong. First, a minor patrol ship sent a signal engine surge. Then, another coolant overflow. Then the flagship main core glitch. Every stabilizer that used her model began to shut down. The fleet command screen turned red, alarm after alarm sounding. And the reports all pointed back to the same design. Velia stood frozen as the chaos grew. This can't be happening. She whispered. Her knees went weak. I checked everything. It passed every test. Ray ran to her side. Something's not right. This doesn't make sense. But before they could react, the security chief stepped in. Velia, you're being detained. Her hands were cuffed in front of the entire queue. And Ruby Kiss has the luxurious texture that glides on smoothly and leaves a rich, long-lasting color. This doesn't make 7 seconds. My life is a sift, my nace pum. Before we sieve, my life, de live we sieve. We sieve, you sieve, my life, we sit. They sid, my life, we sid, w lied, we see with a lied. We sipid sa, pisacolic bites a we sin lied, cov unsisasico it's execri kai ika iscusix to sit to I scuse I guy it's a titis tip beat it dist que uses degrees that diff of the least the sip it's room. She didn't fight it. She just looked around as all eyes stared again, not with respect, but suspicion. All the old whispers came back. She was never meant to be an engineer. She probably hacked the system to get famous. She's too emotional, too big, too reckless. Ray shouted she didn't do this. Someone set her up. But no one listened. Not yet. Hours later, in the cold holding cell, Velia sat on the metal bench. Her badge had been taken. Her sketchbook too. Everything she had worked for gone in a blink. Tears rolled down her face. Not because she was afraid, but because she thought she was finally free from judgment. She thought she had finally earned her place. And now? She was back where she started, lone and doubted. Ray stood on the other side of the glass wall, pressing his hand against it. I don't care what they say, he whispered. I know it wasn't your fault, and I'm going to prove it. Inside, Velia whispered back, just don't forget me. Inside the small, silent cell, Velia sat with her back against the wall. No screens, no sketchbook, no sound, only her thoughts. She had gone from saving a ship to being accused of nearly destroying a fleet. Every word they used against her repeated in her mind. Unstable system, unauthorized design, too risky. She had finally believed she belonged now. It felt like that belief was a mistake. Outside her cell, the halls buzzed with tension. Fleet Command had grounded dozens of ships to prevent further accidents. Everyone wanted answers, and one name kept getting whispered again and again. Velia. But one man wasn't whispering. He was investigating. Ray sat in the dark corner of the engineering records room. Going through old system logs, he scanned activation files, rechecked Velia's code. Line by line, it doesn't add up, he muttered. Her code was clean. Suddenly, he saw it. A tiny change hidden deep inside the sequencer, command added just before launch. One that overloaded the stabilizers after 24 hours. A command that didn't match her writing style. His heart pounded. Someone planted this. Ray rushed to the security office, bursting through the door. "I need access to entry logs for the control server," he said. The officer frowned. "You don't have clearance for that." Ray slammed a data chip on the desk, then explained this sabotage code that showed up after her final approval. The officer paused, scanned the chip, his eyes narrowed. This could change everything. Within minutes, security cameras were pulled, logs checked, and then they found it. A figure entering the control server room one night before the system failure. Face blurred, badge stolen, but the ID signature matched a maintenance override code, and the code belonged to Valia. But there was one problem: Valia was already reassigned to engineering at that time. She hadn't used that override in days. The tech scanned the logs again. Wait. Someone cloned her ID. Ray stepped back, whispering. One name, Gorvax. Within hours, a full investigation began. Security officers stormed the chief engineer's private lab. They found the cloning device, the corrupted data stick, and a voice message. Gorvax, talking to himself. "They'll turn her into a hero," he said in the recording. "I'll show them she's nothing but a mistake in a big body." That was all they needed. The council issued a full reversal. Gorvax was arrested, his badge stripped, and his rank removed. But for Valia, she still sat alone in the cell, not knowing her name was about to be cleared. That evening, the doors opened, and Ray walked in not with sadness, but with a bright smile. "You're free," he said. Valia blinked, unsure if she heard right. "What?" "You were framed," he said. Stepping forward, "We proved it. Gorvax did everything. It's over, Valia. It's really over." Her hands covered her mouth, eyes wide. She couldn't speak. Tears rolled again, but this time, they weren't heavy. They were light. The next day, the main hall of Fleet Command was filled. Officers, engineers, and workers all stood waiting. A voice came through the speakers. Now arriving engineer Valia of Deck 4. She stepped into the light, wearing her new badge, her new uniform. The room once filled with laughter, and whispers stood in silence. Then, someone clapped. Then another, and another. Soon the room echoed with applause. Not mockery, not pity, but respect. Real. Earned respect. The commander himself stepped forward. "You saved us once," he said. "You were betrayed. But you still held your head. Hi, we owe you more than a title. We owe you our thanks." Ray stood beside her, his eyes shining with pride. "Valia. The fleet will always remember you." That night, Valia returned to her quarters. No longer a dark room hidden in maintenance. Now, it was a bright suite near the main deck. She hung her sketches on the wall again, not to hide them, but to celebrate them. She sat by the window, watching the stars move slowly across the black sky, and for the first time in her life, she felt weightless, not because her body had changed, but because the burden of judgment had finally lifted. She whispered softly. "They said my body was too big to matter." She looked at her badge, then the stars. "But now, I'm the reason they're still flying." The starship floated through the black sky like a silver dream. It was quiet now, peaceful, no alarms, no failures, no shouting in the hallways. It was running smoother than ever before, because of her. Valia stood on the upper observation deck, her hands resting gently on the glass railing. Her reflection looked back at her, not weak, not unsure, but confident. She wore her new uniform with pride. Her badge now read, "Lead Systems Designer." Valia Sunflare. Yes, Sunflare. A new name. One she had chosen herself. She didn't want to carry the name given to her when people laughed at her size. She wanted a name that meant strength, warmth, and light. Ray stood beside her, quietly watching the stars with her. They had shared so much failure, triumph, and pain. Now they shared silence. A peaceful, earned silence. "You look different," Ray said gently. Valia turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Bigger." She teased. Ray laughed. No, brighter. The ship had officially restored her name in the records. Her designs were now used on 12 ships across the sector. Fleet Command had invited her to join the Central Research Council, but she had declined. I want to stay where I started, she had said, on this ship. With these people. With the systems I fixed by hand, and they let her, because now they listened when she spoke. They respected her voice, her mind, and her work. Even those who once mocked her had changed. The same workers who had whispered insults now asked her to review their projects one day. A young cadet approached her nervously with a sketchbook. It's not very good, the cadet said, eyes low. Valia gently took it, flipped through the pages, and smiled. I said the same thing about mine, she replied, but someone believed in me. Now, I believe in you. Back in the engineering bay, her station was no longer hidden in the corner. It was in the center. Surrounded by newer screens and brighter lights, the same seat that was once denied to her now belonged to her alone, and on the wall behind her workstation, Ray had mounted something special. The original page from her notebook. The same sketch that had saved the ship, burned slightly at the edges, stained with oil, but still clear. It was framed in glass below. It, a plaque read, "She fixed more than wires, she rewired our hearts." One afternoon, Velia received a message from the outer colonies. It came from a young girl named Mela. The girl had seen Velia speak in a news interview, heard her story. I am big too, the message said. They say I don't fit, but I want to build ships like you. Can I? Velia's eyes filled with tears as she read the words again and again. She wrote back immediately, yes, you can. And one day, I hope to fly in something you build. But not everything was easy. Some people still whispered. Some still stared. Some still couldn't see past her size. But Velia no longer shrunk herself to make others comfortable. She had proven herself, and she didn't owe anyone silence. If they couldn't accept her, that was their burden, not hers. One evening, as she walked the ship's halls, she noticed a new worker struggling to carry a heavy panel. Everyone else passed by, laughing or ignoring him. But Velia stepped forward, took one end of the panel with ease, and helped him place it down safely. The young man looked up, surprised. Thank you. I didn't think anyone would help. Velia smiled. Sometimes, people forget how much strength can hide in someone they overlook. As the ship entered a new galaxy route, the captain called for a gathering. Before we begin the new cycle, the captain said, we honor the one who changed our course. He pointed toward Velia, who stood shyly in the back. Step forward, he said. She walked slowly. Heartbeat steady, and when she reached the front, the captain bowed, then the entire room followed. Every engineer, every tech, every officer, they all bowed to her, because Velia Sunflare wasn't just an engineer now. She had become a symbol, a reminder that brilliance doesn't come in one shape, or voice, or body. That value is not measured in weight, but in courage. She looked around at them, eyes shining. Then she whispered the words that once made her cry, this time with power. They said my body was too big to matter. She paused, smiled, and added, but I just changed everything.